Right now, let's talk about the symbolic events happening today with historian of the British monarchy and constitution, Dr. Luke Blaxill, who joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, we still have a few days to go before the Queen's actual funeral, 11 o'clock on Monday morning, when the world's media will descend and many of the world's dignitaries as well. But last night we saw really perhaps the first opportunity for the royal family to have a private moment of grief. We've seen so many people, being out sharing their grief with mourners outside Balmoral or processions through Edinburgh. But yesterday the Queen's coffin arrived at Buckingham Palace to thousands of mourners and well-wishers outside the palace after travelling down from Edinburgh. But this was the first occasion when the royal family were able to gather themselves behind closed doors. How significant do you think that was?
Well, I think it was obviously very significant for them. I mean, this resting in Buckingham Palace is not something that we've seen before on the death of a monarch prior to the lying in state. I think it was an opportunity for the family and then maybe trusted confidants at the palace to offer their private farewell. But also I think for the Queen to symbolically be seen entering again Buckingham Palace, that symbolic building that in the eyes of the world and in the eyes of the British population that she is so immortally associated with.
Yeah, I mean, indeed. And when we're going to see today, the pomp and the pageantry and the symbolism continuing once again, as we see at 2:22 exactly, the procession of the Queen's coffin in the hearse leading the way to Westminster Hall, where she will be lying in state, where her subjects, many hundreds of thousands, will be able to go and pay their respects in Westminster Hall over the coming 4 days. But that procession is going to be, led by the hearse, but then walking behind will be King Charles, will be the new Prince of Wales, Prince William, his brother Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, but also other leading male figures in the royal family, following behind by the female royals. How symbolic, how important is that? Because so much about the pageantry and the pomp and ceremony of the Queen's death has been about the continuity of the monarchy. The Queen is dead, long live the King. How important are these rituals?
They're extremely important. Since the monarchy stopped wielding hard political power, since the advent of a constitutional monarchy in 1688, and really since the reign of Victoria, the monarchy has lost the remaining hard power that it had. And so really the monarchy's constitutional role, with Parliament wielding the hard power, the power of the head, the power of the legislators, the power of democracy, has been the wielding of soft power by the monarchy, the power of the heart. And it's in those ceremonies, those rituals, which bring together 1,000 years of symbolism. Some of those traditions are very old. Some of them are a lot more recent and indeed even arguably invented. But they help really project a quite magical image that is powerful, beautiful, and in some ways slightly incomprehensible to the British people and the world, which breeds loyalty, it breeds respect, and it allows, I think, the British state and the British Constitution to remain legitimate.
And in terms of some of the backlash we've seen, we've just been talking about it over obviously a public holiday. I mean, one would always expect the funeral of our head of state of 70 years, much loved, much respected, and again much loved, respected even by many who are not monarchists, in terms of her years of duty and the absolutely, I mean, superb way in which she carried out those duties for all of those 7 decades. That you would expect there to be a public holiday, and yet I do detect an awful lot of people are with me in terms of sort of being frustrated that, yes, we understand there'll be a public holiday, but there are certain services that we do expect to continue, like bin collections, like NHS services, GP appointments, and some key services, and it is interesting that perhaps some of that mourning, some of that deference, that actually doesn't go far enough to people being inconvenienced.
Yeah, of course. There is a long and rich tradition of republicanism and indeed royal skepticism that has taken place in Britain. I mean, of course, Britain wasn't always a monarchy. There was a period of time where we also had a republic as well during the interregnum. And understandably, there will be some people who believe this has gone too far. There were complaints even when George VI was lying in state at some of the slightly kind of excessive focus upon royalty in the news and the way in which it took over London, and various services were suspended. So again, some of this criticism is by no means without precedent.
I'm fascinated to hear that. I mean, give me some help in terms of my royal lineage. What year would that have been?
Well, I mean, this was 1952.
1952. I do get some of my Georges confused. I must confess on that. I've not watched enough episodes of The Crown. but that's interesting. That was at a time with far greater deference and far greater, expectation that people would be told what to do and when to do it. And yet, even then, there was something of a backlash.
Well, a backlash is perhaps too strong a term, but there were certainly some reports that we can find of, occasionally, sometimes like now, there was an example in Notting Hill of someone saying something a bit disrespectful about George's corpse beneath the ground going mouldy, and then being attacked by some sort of pro-monarchy people, and then being a little bit of a brawl, and there being some rather modest focus given to, shall we say, the dissenting part of the population. But I think now we would probably give those voices perhaps a little bit more airtime than we would have done.
That's interesting. Can we go back also to some of the more constitutional issues, of course, because as we say, we hear, the Queen is dead, God save the King, and we've seen King Charles doing a tour of the various constituent parts of the United Kingdom. Belfast yesterday, obviously in Scotland, of course, where the Queen's body was lying at rest in St Giles Cathedral, and of course having died in Balmoral. On Friday he's going to be travelling to Wales. Of course he was until last week Prince of Wales. Now that title is going to his son Prince William, but it's very, very significant, particularly his trip to Northern Ireland, wasn't it? And very significant there in terms of the politicians with whom he spoke and the tributes being paid when we consider the history of that realm.
Absolutely. The monarchy is invariably a symbol of the Union. The trips to particularly Northern Ireland and to Scotland, I think, are very important. And the Queen visited Northern Ireland 25 times during her reign, perhaps maybe not as many times as some might have expected. And so the King going there, meeting the leaders of Northern Irish politics, including Republicans as well, while Sinn Féin were understandably opting out of some of these sort of accession ceremonies, they did indeed meet the King. And I think the King showing that he understands the weight of history that there is in Northern Ireland. And also, I think, above all, trying not to simply be seen as a unionist symbol there. I mean, obviously we had William of Orange, a symbol of Anglican supremacy from the late 17th century, who is really very widely idolised in the unionist community in Northern Ireland. And so the King wanting to show that he is a king of Catholics, people of no faith in Northern Ireland, as well as the Protestant unionist community.
And he has always said, hasn't he, he wants to be a defender of the faiths, not just the faith, as head of the Church of England. Dr. Luke Blexall, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed, a monarchy and constitutional historian. Quick word from Benedict Spence on it.